And I won't be able to do this quote justice, but it's from a book by Kurt Schneider and Rollo May, who are two leaders in that field, who talk about, we human beings crave at the same time both expansion and contraction, but there's a fear of both. To contract too much is to become, condensed and hard and rigid, and, to expand too much is to potentially, or at least the feeling is, confront madness and chaos, and
you lose yourself in it. Yeah.
Exactly. You lose yourself. Therefore, if you lose if you expand too much, maybe you lose all the people in your world, and you're lonely, and we are social creatures, and we want to be. So I think that when we're looking at this idea of expanding our blinders, both those things come into play, and they're legitimate fears. They're certainly human fears, to a degree legitimate, because we need to stay centered, I think, and expand. And, so it is that it's like the inhale and the exhale. You've got to have a little bit of both. And I would say if one is interested in expanding their blinders, just to tread carefully, a little at a time. You don't have to rip them off. I'm not interested in ripping them off, because maybe that way does my madness. On the other hand, I could never be satisfied living a life where I didn't feel like I was psychologically expanding my perception and becoming a better person. Yeah.
Has it ever broken bad for you? Have you ever ripped them off too far, where you've been like, whoa, let me cover it up a little bit more?
Yes. Yeah. Again, early on in my youth, I was so interested, as I said, growing up in Salem, I was very interested in like all these psychologicals, and I wasn't telling anybody, nobody was training me. I was just reading a lot. I was trying to expand my brain. And I had this thought at one point, like, oh, it just sort of hit me like a rock. If I do this too much or too fast, I could lose my mind. And it terrified me. And I stopped looking into all that stuff for a really, really long time. And so interestingly, I think, for a long time in my life, I did have a fear of losing my mind, and yet that fear just was a reflection of a passion that I had at the same time. And sometimes that is, our fears are also the shadow side of our enthusiasm.
Yeah. It's almost like, there's like a healthy aspect to that, where you want to have a little, if you don't have any fear that you might lose your mind, you're probably not going far enough. Yeah. Right. To your point about the balance, but obviously you don't want to go so far where you actually do lose your mind. So, and again, back to it, that's an uncomfortable thing for a lot of people listening, us, I'm sure, even the idea of being somewhat comfortable with thinking like, ooh, I may lose my mind a little bit. Then don't do it. Just don't do that. Just stay in your box, stay home, and be happy and comfortable. And I get it. For some people, maybe that's what's right for them. But I resonate more with what you're saying. It feels like there's too much to be learned. There's too much out there, that it would be too much regret in not pushing it and not trying to find out more. And that risk is worth it. As long as you're cautious, right? That risk seems to be worth it.
Yeah. That's someone of the, I think a great value of the podcast that you do is talking of values. Having these conversations with people, I think, is a great service to folks who kind of want to go and stretch their sense of what are my values, and how do people feel about them. And I think listening to or having conversations like this, that, especially in a really trusting kind of quote unquote safe space, where you feel like you can experiment with ideas safely without the fear of, say, being canceled or, just
judged.
Exactly. Is incredibly valued or valuable. And unfortunately, I think I do feel the world we're living in, those spaces for honest exploration in that way are getting less and less, because in some ways I feel perhaps we are getting more and more rigid on some level as a self-protect mechanism.
I appreciate that personally. And I totally agree. That's why anybody having conversations like this, I love. So for me, it's like, hey, I'd love to be a part of that too.
Yeah.
What do you make of that though? As an anthropologist, as somebody who studied human history, human nature, culture, why do you think we are seeming to be trending more in that way, where we are getting more rigid? Was that inevitable? Is that just human nature, or?
Well, I don't know. I have no clue. So anything I say now is just really maybe. Maybe it is more that inhale, exhale, but on a larger historical,
Mm,
there we go, you look at the cycles of history and they do tend to have certain patterns of freedom followed by constriction, followed by freedom, followed by constriction. And it's that maybe it's the breadth of history that we go through this.
mm.
And yeah.
There's something cool about, I mean, so I'm not particularly religious, although I'm open to anything, as you might imagine in this. And there's something in that explanation to me that's representative of the idea of like, it's almost, we are a microcosm of the universe, right? Exactly as you said, that contraction, that inhale, exhale. And it does make it feel like it is connected in some way. I don't know if it's connected in the way that some people, like we're literally all one, maybe we're all one and we're all the same and it's all love. But there's so much connection in what we experience, what the universe experiences and all that, where it does feel like there is something to it that spiritual level on a meta level does connect it all in some way. And to me, there's some comfort in that. I don't know how you think of that, but there's some comfort in that to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it very fascinating. And I'm sure comforting in some level too, although I think I get at it kind of intellectually, like we are these, whatever the truth of reality is, it does seem like we're these little organisms of existence that, just as there are bacteria within our bodies that are part of us. We are not just a singular being, we are multiples because we've got bacteria, we've got all kinds of living creatures within us. Perhaps we too are part of some larger living creature as the bacteria are with us. So I'm very interested in that idea of as above, so below. It's kind of I wouldn't call it comforting because it's, in a way, it's a little creepy, but I do find it interesting.
Yeah, I do too. Very much intellectually, as you said, and there's a lot of logic to it too, which I think is what makes it interesting. And maybe the comfort that I speak of comes from, like, even as you explain that, and you're right, we don't know, right? We're all speculating, we're philosophizing. But when there is a explanation like that seems logical, I think part of the comfort for me is like, maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's it. Maybe we finally hit that first principle. And obviously we'll never know, but I think it speaks to that search and that desire and that need to say, but what is it though? But like really, literally, what is it?
Yeah.